Growing up, my father was larger than life to me. He was the kind of man who could fix a broken engine with a paperclip and a roll of duct tape. The type who never lost his temper, who always seemed to have the right words when things went wrong. In our small town, everyone knew him Mr. Reliable. He was a Sunday morning churchgoer, a volunteer firefighter, a man who coached Little League even after I aged out of it. If you had asked me who my hero was, I would have said his name without a second thought. He wasn't perfect, but he was good, honest, decent, simple. At least, that's what I believed for the first 30 years of my life. I didn't realize anything was wrong until my cousin Brian made a strange comment at a family barbecue. We were standing around the grill, sipping beers, teasing each other the way guys do, when Brian elbowed me and said, "Asterisk, you think your old man's a saint? He could teach a master class in lying, you know." Asterisk. He laughed afterward, like it was just a joke. But the way his eyes flickered, the way his mouth twisted a little too tightly, it stayed with me. I laughed it off at the time. But that night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, walls still decorated with peeling posters of baseball players long since retired, the words circled in my head like vultures. A masterclass in lying. Why would he say that? Was it just a stupid joke? Or was there something more to it? The next day, I tried to shake it off. Tried to enjoy the reunion, the laughter, the grilled hot dogs, the kids running barefoot through the grass. But it was like a splinter under my skin, small, irritating, impossible to ignore. A few days later, I was helping Dad clean out the garage. It was nothing major, just an excuse to spend some time together before I headed back to the city. The garage was a museum of my childhood. Dusty fishing poles, worn-out tools, boxes of old Christmas decorations. Nothing unusual, nothing sinister, until I stumbled across the old toolbox. It was tucked away in the far corner, behind a stack of flattened, moving boxes that hadn't been touched in years. The latch was rusty. The blue paint was peeling. Something about it caught my eye, maybe because it was so out of place, looking almost hidden. I popped it open without thinking. Inside were the usual things: hammers, screwdrivers, old nails scattered loose at the bottom. But underneath it all, wrapped in a faded oil-stained rag, was a small bundle of papers. Curious, I pulled them out. There was a letter, yellow with age, addressed to a name I didn't recognize. To Mark Langley. I frowned. Mark Langley? Who the hell was Mark Langley? I flipped the envelope over, and that's when my heart skipped a beat. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my father's. I tucked the letter back into the toolbox, my hands suddenly clammy. My mind raced. Why would Dad be writing letters under a different name? Was it an old friend? An alias for some silly prank? Or something darker? For the first time in my life, I felt a tiny crack form in the rock-solid foundation of who I believed my father to be. I told myself it was nothing, just an old letter. No big deal. But deep down, I knew better. It was a beginning, the first loose thread in a tightly woven fabric. And once I started pulling, there would be no way to stop. I just didn't realize yet how deeply the lies went, or how much it would cost us all to uncover them. I should have left it alone. That would have been a smart thing to do. Pretend I never saw that letter, shove it back under the rusted hammer and broken screwdrivers, and forget about it. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. It burrowed under my skin, demanding answers, even as some part of me screamed to leave the past buried. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, after Dad went to bed, I found myself back in the garage, barefoot, still in my jeans and t-shirt. The toolbox was exactly where I'd left it, tucked away like a secret waiting to be unearthed. This time, I took the bundle of papers out completely. There wasn't just one letter. There were several, all addressed to Mark Langley. Different dates, different towns. Some looked decades old. The ink faded to a soft gray. Others were newer, crisp, as if written in the past few years. My hands shook as I unfolded the topmost letter. It wasn't long, barely a few lines. I know what you did. You can't hide forever. We will find you. No signature, no return address. Just those cold, clinical words scrawled across the page. A shiver ran down my spine. Was it a joke? A prank? Some old high school drama I didn't know about? I dug deeper, sorting through the yellow papers. There were more letters, some angry, some pleading. One in particular caught my eye. It was dated nearly 30 years ago, the year after I was born. Mark, please, I can't do this alone. Our son deserves better. Our son. I sat back on my heels, the letter trembling in my hands. What the hell was I looking at? Was this about me? Was there someone else? Another family? 1,000 questions screamed inside my head, but I had no answers. Just a cold, metallic smell of old tools, the low hum of the garage light buzzing overhead, and a growing sense of dread curling in my gut. For the next few days, I tried to act normal. I packed up my things, helped Mom clean out the fridge, joked around with Dad about football and car repairs like we always did. But it was like living in a cracked mirror. Everything looked the same on the surface, but deep down it was splintered. Fake. I caught myself studying him when he wasn't looking. The way his hands shook slightly when he tied his boots. The way he winced when the phone rang. And he didn't recognize the number. Little things. Things I'd never noticed before. Was it guilt that weighed down his shoulders? Fear? Regret? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? I needed more. Late one night, long after my parents had gone to bed, I snuck into Dad's home office. It felt wrong, violating his space like that, but I couldn't stop myself. The desk drawers were mostly boring. Old tax returns, half-used notepads, expired coupons. But in the bottom drawer, behind a stack of outdated road maps, I found an old metal lockbox. It was locked, of course, but Dad wasn't exactly creative. I tried his birthday, and the latch popped open with a soft click. Inside, neatly organized in plastic sleeves, were a series of documents. Birth certificates, old IDs, photographs. Some were familiar. My birth certificate, my high school diploma. Others were not. There was a driver's license with a picture of my father, younger, clean-shaven, but the name wasn't his. It said Mark Langley. Another ID from a neighboring state, dated even earlier, with another name altogether. 2 different identities. 2 different lives. My stomach twisted painfully. How many versions of my father existed? Which one had raised me? Which one was real? I heard a creak behind me and nearly jumped out of my skin. Dad stood in the doorway, half in shadow, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't angry. He just looked tired, older than I had ever seen him, like a man who had been running a very long time and had finally run out of road. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. And then, quietly, almost too quietly to hear, he said, "Asterisk, I was hoping you'd never find out." Asterisk. I didn't know what to say. For a second, I just stood there, frozen by the open drawer, the lockbox at my feet, like a confession someone had thrown down between us. Dad leaned against the doorframe, his shoulders sagging, the weight of decades pressing him down. "Sit down, son," he said, his voice rough. Asterisk. You deserve to hear it all. Asterisk. I pulled out the worn leather chair from his desk and sat, heart pounding so heart echoed in my ears. Dad crossed the room slowly, each step like dragging a chain behind him. He took the other chair, the one Mom always used when she came in to nag him about paying bills, and sat facing me, his hands folded tightly between his knees. There was a long silence, only the quiet hum of the old ceiling fan above us. And then he spoke. He told me his real name wasn't Mark Langley, not originally. He was born Daniel Cole in a small town 3 states away, a place I'd never even heard of. He grew up the youngest of 5 kids, dirt poor in a broken, violent home. My father was a mean drunk, Dad said, staring somewhere over my shoulder. Asterisk. He used to beat my mother bloody and line us up to watch. Said it'd make us tough. Said it was the only way to survive. Asterisk. My stomach churned. I had never once seen my father raise his hand in anger. He was a man who patched up my skin knees, who fixed my bike at midnight before a school race, who hugged me after my first breakup like it broke his own heart. How could that man come from this? But the story didn't end there. When Dad was 17, something happened. Something bad. Something he never fully explained. Not then, Not even now. He just said, asterisk, there was a fight. Things got out of hand. Asterisk, he left that night and never looked back. Changed his name. Hitchhiked across the country. Took odd jobs under fake IDs. Sleeping in cars, abandoned barns, under bridges. He built a whole new life from scratch, one careful eye at a time. And then I met your mother, he said, his voice cracking for the first time. Asterisk. She was the first good thing in my life. The first person who didn't look at me like trash. Asterisk. He paused, swiping a hand over his face, trying to hide the emotion, but I saw it. I saw the boy he used to be, scared and desperate and aching for something better. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it couldn't touch you, he said, voice raw. Asterisk. I thought maybe I could outrun it. Outrun me. Asterisk. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me was reeling from the shock. My whole life, my entire identity, built on a lie. Another part of me understood. How could I hate him for wanting to escape a nightmare? For trying to give me the childhood he never had? But there was something he wasn't telling me. I could feel it, a tightness in the air, a shadow behind his words. Asterisk, what about the letters? Asterisk, I asked quietly. Asterisk, the threats? The people who said they were looking for you? Asterisk, Dad flinched just slightly. For the first time, I saw fear, real fear, flicker across his face. That's not just about me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Asterisk, it's about you too. Asterisk, the floor seemed to drop out from under me. Me? How? Why? Before I could press him, a sudden knock echoed from the front door, sharp, urgent. We both jumped. Dad stood up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. He looked at me, a warning burning in his eyes. Asterisk, stay here. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, stay here. Asterisk. And without another word, he strode out of the room. I sat there, heart hammering against my ribs, listening. At first, just muffled voices. Dad speaking low and firm. Another voice sharper, angrier. I couldn't make out the words. Then a loud thud. A crash. Something, someone yelling. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I got up and crept toward the hallway. I saw the front door wide open, the night spilling in, cold and black. Dad stood on the porch, squaring off against two men I didn't recognize, both tall, both dressed in dark clothes. One of them shoved Dad hard against the railing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I caught one word, clear and sharp like a gunshot. Asterisk, blood. Asterisk. My blood went ice cold. Something was very, very wrong. And it wasn't just about Dad's past anymore. It was about me. I should have stayed hidden. I knew it. Every instinct in me screamed to turn back, to close the door, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, watching as my father, the man I thought I knew, faced down two strangers in the cold night air. The taller one leaned into him, a sneer twisting his face. Asterisk, you thought you could run forever, Danny? Asterisk, he spat. Asterisk, you really thought you could just pretend none of it happened? That blood wasn't on your hands. Asterisk, Dad didn't flinch. I paid for my mistakes, he said in a voice that wasn't the one I knew. It was harder, older, almost like steel bending under pressure. Asterisk, I've spent every day since trying to be a better man. Asterisk, the second man, stalkier and meaner looking, stepped closer. His voice was lower, more dangerous. Doesn't work that way, he said. Asterisk, blood's blood. Debts have to be paid by you or by your kin. Asterisk, kin, me. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. What the hell had my father gotten into? One of them glanced toward the house, and I instinctively ducked behind the doorframe, heart slamming in my throat. Had they seen me? Had they come for me? A part of me wanted to burst outside, demand answers. Another part, the smarter part, stayed frozen listening. You've got a nice life here, Danny, the tall one said, dragging the words out like a blade. Asterisk, pretty little family. Shame if something happened to them. Asterisk, I heard a scuffle, Dad lunging forward, but then a grunt of pain and a heavy thud. My gut twisted. Dad was fighting them. Alone. Without thinking, I grabbed the old baseball bat from the corner, the same one I used to take to Little League games, and barreled toward the front door. By the time I reached the porch, it was over. Dad was standing over one of the men, who was groaning on the ground, clutching his ribs. The other guy was backing away slowly, hands raised. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Asterisk, they're coming, Danny. And next time you won't see them coming. Asterisk. He grabbed his friend by the jacket and half dragged him down the steps, disappearing into the night. Dad watched him go, breathing hard, his fists still clenched at his sides. For a long time, neither of us said anything. The night was too loud. The crickets, the distant sound of barking dog, the buzz of streetlights overhead. Finally, he turned to me. His eyes looked different, older, haunted. "Come inside," he said quietly. Asterisk, there's more you need to know. Asterisk, we sat in the living room, the battered coffee table between us. The same table where I used to build Lego castles. The same couch where Dad had fallen asleep during countless Sunday football games. But now it felt like a stranger's house. They were part of it, he said finally. Asterisk, part what I ran from. Asterisk, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to scrub the memories off his skin. When I left home, he said, asterisk, I didn't just walk away from my father. I walked away from a lot of things. People I used to run with. Bad people. People who thought blood loyalty was everything. Asterisk. He looked up at me, and there was a sadness in his eyes, so deep it was almost unbearable. Asterisk. I made mistakes, son. Big ones. I did things I'm not proud of. Things I can never take back. Asterisk. I swallowed hard. Asterisk. Like what? Asterisk, I asked, even though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. He hesitated. Then he said, so quietly I almost missed it. Asterisk. I hurt someone. Asterisk. The room seemed to tilt. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said quickly. Asterisk. It was a fight. A stupid, drunken fight. I was just a kid, but that doesn't excuse it. He died and I ran. I ran because I knew no one would believe me. Not there. Not in that town. And I didn't just run from the law. I ran for myself. Asterisk. I stared at him, my mind spinning. My father, my hero, had killed someone? Accident or not, how was I supposed to process that? The man you are now, I said hoarsely, asterisk, the life you built, was it all just fake? Asterisk. His face crumpled. No, he said fiercely. Asterisk, that's the only real thing I've ever done. Loving your mother, raising you, being better. Asterisk. Tears pricked my eyes, and I looked away, ashamed. I didn't know what to feel. Love, anger, betrayal, confusion. They all tangled together in a tight knot inside me. Dad leaned back, looking so tired, so small somehow. Those men tonight, he said after a long moment. Asterisk. They're a reminder that you can't outrun the past, no matter how fast you go. Asterisk. Asterisk. What do they want? Asterisk, I asked. He hesitated. Some of them still believe in the old ways, he said bitterly. Asterisk, blood for blood. They think, if they can't get to me, they'll get to you instead. Asterisk. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Asterisk, me? Why me? I wasn't even born. Asterisk. Doesn't matter, Dad said. Asterisk to them. Blood's blood. Asterisk. I sat there, stunned, feeling the world tilt under my feet again. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my very identity, it was all crumbling. And worse, I wasn't just living in Dad's shadow anymore. I was part of the target. Outside, somewhere in the dark, I thought I heard a car engine start. Or maybe it was just my imagination. Dad reached over and put his hand on my shoulder. We'll get through this, he said. But the look in his eyes said he wasn't so sure. And deep down, neither was I, because something told me this was only the beginning. The next few days felt like I was living in a haze. Everything I'd known, everything I thought I understood about my family, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Dad was more distant now, quieter. He'd retreated into himself, like a man who had already said too much and now feared saying even a word more. There was no reassurance from him anymore, no promise that everything would be fine. I tried to talk to him several times after that night, but every time I opened my mouth, the word stuck in my throat. Was I supposed to forgive him? Could I even understand what he'd done? The weight of that knowledge, of the secret he'd kept from me for so long, pressed on me like a stone in my chest. Every night, I would lie awake, thinking about the man who had raised me, the man I thought I knew so well, and I would question everything. Had I ever truly known him? Was the father I had loved a facade? Had I been raised on lies? I couldn't shake the image of those two men who had come to our door, the way they had spoken about blood, how they'd said that debts needed to be paid. I couldn't forget the way they had looked at me, like they were waiting for me to become something they could use. It was only a matter of time before they came back. I could feel in my bones. They wouldn't leave. And Dad, he was acting like it was already over. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. The world I thought I understood had just been ripped open, and I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. One evening, after dinner, I couldn't sit still any longer. I had to know more. I had to confront the truth, the full truth. Dad, I said, my voice trembling even though I tried to sound steady. Asterisk, I need to know everything. Don't hide from me anymore. Asterisk, he looked up from his plate, his face a mask of tired resignation. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of his past was too much for him to carry alone. I know, he said quietly. Asterisk, but some things are better left alone. Asterisk, I shook my head. Asterisk, no, you've already told me too much. You can't just leave me hanging. Not now. Asterisk, he met my eyes, and for the first time since that night, I saw something in his gaze, fear. You don't understand, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Asterisk, this isn't just about me. It's about you now. You've got to trust me. You don't want to know the whole story. Asterisk, I wanted to scream. I already know too much. But instead, I stood up and walked toward the door. Asterisk, I'm not going to sit here, pretending everything's fine. I won't ignore it. Asterisk, I could feel his eyes on me as I left the house. The night air was sharp, biting at my skin as I stood outside. I paced back and forth, the world spinning around me. There was no way I could just sit back and accept this. Not after everything that had been revealed. I needed to find answers. Real answers. A few hours later, after some of the panic had settled in, I found myself standing in front of a man I had never met. His name was Tom. A quiet, unassuming guy, but he worked for the same company that my father had left when he decided to disappear. And he knew things that would give me the truth, or at least a better picture of what had really happened. Asterisk, what do you know about my father? Asterisk, I asked, my voice low, urgent. I didn't have time to beat around the bush. Tom looked at me for a long moment, sizing me up. Then he motioned for me to sit. You're asking the right questions, he said, his voice gravelly. Asterisk, but I think you're not ready for the answers. Asterisk, I didn't care. Asterisk, I need to know. Asterisk, Tom exhaled sharply, like he was weighing a decision in his mind. Finally, he nodded. Danny was always the best at hiding things. He began, his eyes locking with mine. Asterisk, but some secrets are harder to bury than others. The man you know, he's not the same man he was when I knew him. Asterisk, I leaned forward, hanging on every word. He was involved in some dangerous stuff back in the day. Tom continued, his voice growing quieter. Asterisk, but it wasn't just the business side of things. It was personal in a way you can't imagine. Asterisk, my heart hammered in my chest. Asterisk, what do you mean? Asterisk, he hesitated, looking around as if making sure no one was listening. Then he leaned in closer. Your dad had a partner, Tom said, his voice barely a whisper. Asterisk, a guy he worked with for years. But that's not all. They were in debt to some very bad people, and when your dad tried to back out of the deal, that's when things started going wrong. That's when the people in your family's past started taking matters into their own hands. Asterisk. I felt like the ground was slipping from beneath me. Asterisk. What does that have to do with me? Asterisk, I demanded. Tom sighed heavily, looking almost sad. Asterisk, everything. Your father's past is tangled up with yours now. You're a part of the game whether you want to be or not. Those men who came to your house, they were just the beginning. Asterisk. I could barely process what he was saying. I thought back to the words of the men who had come to the door, how they had threatened my family, how they had made it clear that blood was blood. Asterisk, what do they want? Asterisk, I asked, barely able to get the words out. Tom shook his head, his face grim. Asterisk, they want the debt paid. And your father's not going to be able to cover it much longer, which means you might have to pay for him. Asterisk, my whole world stopped. I didn't hear anything after that. I just stood there, numb, trying to process the weight of what he had said. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. But deep down, I knew it was true. I walked back home in a daze, barely remembering how I got there. I had no idea how to face Dad after what I had learned. And now, with everything hanging over my head, my family's legacy, my own future, I was more uncertain than ever. But one thing was clear. The past was never truly gone, and it would always come back to collect its dues. The weight of the truth hung over me like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. I barely slept, haunted by everything I had learned. Each passing hour seemed to stretch endlessly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the end was coming. Not just for the secrets, but for my family as I knew it. I needed to confront Dad. It had to be him. No more running. No more half-truths. If I was going to understand what had happened, if I was going to face whatever this future held, it started with him. I waited until the house was quiet, until the soft hum of the night filled the space around me. The house had never felt emptier, colder. I walked into the living room, where Dad sat in his favorite armchair, staring blankly at the fireplace. His usual strength was gone, replaced by a man who was simply worn out from years pretending. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of resignation and dread. You need to tell me everything, I said, my voice trembling only slightly. But underneath it, there was an undeniable steel. I couldn't let this linger any longer. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. For a moment, I almost thought he might turn away again. But then he nodded, almost as if he had been waiting for this. Asterisk, I didn't want you to be involved in this, son. You were never supposed to know. Asterisk, I felt a tightness in my chest, my pulse quickening. Asterisk, why? Asterisk, I demanded. Asterisk, why did you let it get this far? Why didn't you protect us? Why didn't you protect me? Asterisk, he was silent for a long moment, his eyes flicking toward the old family pictures hanging on the wall, as if looking for something that might give him the courage to speak. Finally, he looked back at me, his voice low. It started a long time ago, before you were born, he began. Asterisk, I was involved in something illegal, dangerous, the kind of thing you can't just walk away from. There was no clean way out, no way to fix things without consequences. Asterisk, I sat down across from him, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened. He wasn't looking at me now, as though telling me the truth had cost him everything. Asterisk, you remember those men, don't you? Asterisk, he asked, his voice tight. Asterisk, the ones who came to the door that night? They weren't just after money. They were after me, after what I owed. And I couldn't pay it back without putting everyone I love in danger. Asterisk, I nodded slowly, remembering their threats, their cold, calculating eyes, their insinuations. And now it made sense, in a sick, twisted way. And the debt, it wasn't just money, he continued. Asterisk, it was your future. My mistake was letting it get that far. Asterisk, my mind raced. Asterisk, my future? What do you mean? Asterisk, he hesitated, as though the words themselves pained him. Then, with a single, devastating sentence, he shattered everything I thought I knew. Asterisk, you're the one they want, son. Asterisk, the room seemed to tilt under the weight of his words. I stood up, my breath quickening. Asterisk, What are you talking about? Asterisk. Your mother and I made a choice when you were born, he said, his voice filled with regret. Asterisk. We never wanted you involved in this, but it's inevitable. You're the one who will have to take my place. Asterisk. My stomach twisted with disbelief. Asterisk. No, that's not possible. What are you saying? Asterisk. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a depth of sorrow I had never seen before. Asterisk. It was always supposed to be you. The moment you were born, the moment we made the deal, you were the one who would be the heir to everything, to the debt, the responsibility, the business. The people I work with, they don't care about me anymore. They care about you. Asterisk. I staggered back, my world crashing down around me. Asterisk. You mean they've been grooming me this whole time? Asterisk, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Asterisk, they've been watching you. They've been waiting for you to be ready. Asterisk, for a moment, I thought I might collapse. The truth was too much. I had spent my entire life thinking I had choices, that my path was mine to forge. But now, everything had changed. I wasn't just the son of a man who had made a series of poor decisions. I was now the heir to his legacy, a legacy I had never asked for, a legacy I could never escape. Asterisk, what am I supposed to do? Asterisk, I asked, my voice barely a breath. Asterisk, how do I walk away from this? How do I fix everything you've broken? Asterisk, Dad's face twisted with pain, but there was something else there too, something that resembled hope. Asterisk, you can't fix everything, but you can stop it from getting worse. It's your choice now. You're the one who will either continue the cycle or end it. Asterisk, I swallowed hard, staring at him, knowing deep down that the decision was mine. He had put it on my shoulders, the weight of this dark legacy, this dangerous truth. I felt the weight of every choice I had made up until now, every wrong turn, every bad decision, and it was too late to go back. In the days that followed, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The men who had come to collect the debt would return. They would come for me, and I had a choice to make. Would I give in, become part of the world my father had left me with, or would I break free, destroy the web of lies and betrayals, and take control of my own future? It wasn't an easy decision. But deep down, I knew I couldn't continue down the same path. I couldn't let my father's mistakes define me. I wasn't his puppet. I wasn't anyone's puppet. So I made my choice. I walked away from the life he had planned for me, knowing that the road ahead would be even harder. But in that moment, as I left it all behind, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I was free. And that, perhaps, was the greatest revelation of all. Sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that set us free.